we bring to you from Talking Cowboys and the Draft Show, Emmy Award winner and triplets dad, it is Kyle Youmans. How's it going, man?
What's up, guys? It's been a while. Good to talk to you again.
Hey, so are we taking Golden or Tet?
Well, I think it really does come down to who's there out of the two guys. I still feel like they're leaning wide receiver. I think if Tet is there, I think he's higher on their board. If it's Matthew Golden and Tetairoa McMillan's not there, then I think it's more of a conversation, but I would still lean Golden in that regard. I mean, I think the Cowboys are going to come away with a wide receiver in the first round. I have that gut feeling just based off of the research and the fit and the value. That's just kind of where I'm at with it all.
Hey, can I ask you a question about that then? Because like that definitely makes sense to me, but this is one of the deals where if the board shifts in a way you didn't expect, then you have to adjust. Because there's been rumblings that like, hey, could Genty go 5 and then Tet go 6? And if that were to happen, then I wonder if another team would pull the trigger early on Golden. And let's say you got to 12, neither one of them are there. Then do you have to reevaluate your plan?
Maybe. And we talk a lot about window dressing your board on the draft show. And I know you guys both are close with Brian, and you kind of heard that term once or twice. But just to explain it for those viewers out there, window dressing your board means you're going to rank and stack all of these players 1 through 257 or however many players they have on their board. They'll rank those guys, and they don't want to jump from, let's say, rank 10 to rank 12 just because it fits a need. They want to draft via the board. You stacked it for a reason. Your players are on there for a reason. Pick the best player available, and that's where that BPA conversation comes in. I wouldn't be surprised if we're getting there, and I think I would be surprised if both wide receivers were off the board.
Yeah,
I think there will be at least one guy there. I get what you're saying, but there's a conversation, kind of like what I said a minute ago, about Matthew Golden. There are other names there. Mykel Williams from Georgia, Shamar Stewart from Texas A&M, Will Johnson from Michigan, Omarion Hampton from North Carolina, Kelvin Banks, Texas, Josh Simmons, Ohio State. All of those names are very viable at 12 and very possible at 12, and we're trying to figure out who they have in that stack between Tetairoa, McMillan, and Matthew Golden. There's a good chance that Matthew Golden is closer to Tet than we think, and he's closer to McMillan at the top of their wide receiver and their overall board. But there's also a chance that if Tetairoa McMillan's gone, then there are these other names there. So I think they'd be comfortable with a guy like Mykel Williams or Shamar Stewart, who are edge rushers and don't necessarily fill an immediate need, but certainly something that you can build around. Same thing at corner. I think right now there's some pause on whether or not Trayvon Diggs is going to be ready for the start of the year, where there's been the rotating injuries at corner. Maybe you take a guy like Will Johnson and feel good about that at 12 anyways. So it may not be one of those wide receivers, but they have a comfortable stack that I believe are going to go by. And if we see one of those names instead of Matthew Golden, that means they were not window dressing their board and they stayed true to the way they stacked these players.
Can you walk us through your general thoughts about this specific player or just general philosophy? You mentioned Stewart. How do you feel about players that, like, hey, they look like they should be able to do all these things, but then you look at their college production and maybe it's not there?
No, his production wasn't there. I mean, he had 4 sacks last year, was a 5-star, 4-star prospect, depending on what recruiting service you looked at, and it ended up being kind of the letdown of the Texas A&M defense. And that's tough to say because he was still one of the better defenders on their roster, and he's one of the better defenders in the SEC, led the SEC in pressures, but as I just said, he only had the 4 sacks to go along with it. So it was a finishing element from Shamar Stewart. His film was good, good enough to go first round for sure. I have a second round grade on him, though, because personally I tend to value collegiate production against good competition a little bit more than maybe some other scouts do. A lot of other scouts are going to go just by the film, and if they're going by just by the film and the character of these guys, and I think he does have that high character, got to talk to him a little bit during the Senior Bowl in Mobile this year, was nothing but impressed with him and his tape along the way, but the production wasn't there. So I tend to knock players for that once or twice down the line, because I just think it's a good indication of what you will do at the next level. Not always the case, and I think Micah Parsons is a guy like that, who his college production was good. Was it off-the-charts production? It was more so a ceiling, and he ended up hitting that ceiling with Dallas and did so very quickly. So I think it could go both ways. For Shamar Stewart, I don't think I would be super pumped at the pick at 12, but overall he's a guy with some bend, some athleticism, off the edge. He's going to give you a pass rushing ability that maybe you lack a little bit on this roster since DeMarcus Lawrence is no longer with the team.
It has kind of felt like the onus has been on skill positions in the first 3 rounds. Like a lot of weight's been put on skill positions there. When do you feel comfortable addressing the trenches, whether it be offensive line or the defensive tackle area for this team?
Or Tyler Booker at 12.
Yeah, that's another question about Peter Schrager and his mock draft right now.
Did Schrager mock Booker to 12?
Yeah, at 12.
Okay. Yeah, the thing about offensive line is you have to be comfortable taking them anywhere, because Dallas, one, has a great track record of taking offensive linemen. I'm not counting Tyler Guyton at the moment. We'll see how that turns out, but on the record, I'm not giving up on Tyler Guyton quite yet. And because of that, I think it's more likely you would see it in the later rounds than you would in those first 3 rounds. Just because, I mean, if you guys were to look at me and say, what are your top 3 needs you have to have a starter at by the time, whether it's draft or not, where are you getting your starters for the 2025 season? You would probably say running back, probably say wide receiver 2, and probably a 1 tech on your defensive line, right?
Yeah.
Maybe corner you could throw in there too, depending on what Diggs' situation is and kind of where that sits. Offensive line's not in that conversation, but it's such a premium position. And Jerry said it yesterday during the pre-draft press conference, but it's the team within the team. And you have to find a way to give Dak Prescott time to throw. And they certainly don't feel like last year they protected him well enough. And Jerry said it yesterday too, that he felt like at times this offensive line was not good enough in 2024. So they put value on it, and I think they've prepared themselves to where if the 12th overall pick comes around, let's say there's no Tetairoa McMillan, there's no Ashton Genty, maybe even some of these edge rushers are off the board early, there's a chance you get to see multiple edge rushers in the top 10 again this year. Then I think they're comfortable taking offensive line. Is it the number 1 need? No, but it's such a premium position, and you have to get it right day in and day out in order for your offense to be successful. Then I think if the right guy is there for them, which could be Kelvin Banks, I know they're really high on him out of Texas. Maybe Will Campbell from LSU falls a little bit. I know they like Josh Simmons out of Ohio State quite a bit. He'll probably play tackle, so there's going to be some movement there. But I think they'd rather figure it out with the talent in hand than pass up on it and fill other needs and try and force it.
You were talking about cornerback, not necessarily at 12, but just overall cornerback depth on this team. Mm-hmm. If you're the Cowboys, do you not have to kind of operate like maybe as if Trayvon Diggs won't be here, just looking at the last couple of years?
Yeah, I think that's exactly how they're looking at it. And I asked the question yesterday in the presser to Brian Schottenheimer. I asked him, what do you value? Because the defensive coaching staff has had significant influence when it comes to your corners in the past. I mean, we've all talked about Dan Quinn's type of guys, the long, lengthy, speedy corners, and how that's changed over the last couple of years. Mike Zimmer wanted more of the athletic, stick in your hip pocket type of guys. It sounded like Brian Schottenheimer, and I asked him kind of to speak on Eberflus's behalf as the defensive coordinator. I asked Schotty, he said speed and size. I mean, of course you want those 2 things, but he said the length is a big thing and the character is a big thing. So with all that being said, it didn't sound like, we don't really need corner. It sounded like, hey, we are trying to find the right player to fit our system and to fit our bill. And there's a guy in the first round, and Will Johnson out of Michigan, that fits that specifically. I think if he were to say something similar to what maybe Mike Zimmer said last year in what he wants as a defensive back, I think he may have said something that would have led me in the way of Jahdae Barron, the corner from Texas.
Yeah.
But I think what he said yesterday kind of circled Will Johnson in my mind as a legitimate possibility at 12 overall, even to the point where, I mean, I'm playing around. We'll release our final mock draft tomorrow on DallasCowboys.com, but I'm playing around with the thought that maybe he's the pick at 12 over some guys like Golden and Stewart and some of these other names that are possible.
You know, that's yesterday he did mention speed is something you don't have to coach, and I think that's the reason he brings character to the table too, is because like a guy like Emeka Egbuka, the character on that kind of guy right there, I don't have to coach him. He's going to put in the work on his own. I don't have to go out and say, hey, we have to have you do these things.
Yeah, and I talked a moment ago about how much I value production from the collegiate ranks against good competition. Well, he won a national championship. There's the first one.
Yeah.
He's one of the leading receivers, if not the leading receiver in Ohio State program history, because he did it as the Robin to so many other guys' Batman, right? He was behind Jackson Smith and Jigba. He was behind some of these other top wide receivers that had played in this Ohio State program the last couple of years, and he's just continuously done his job and been very, very good at doing so, to the point where he got better as every year went along, and now his tape is first-round quality. Now, do I think he brings the same skill set to the table as a Tetairoa McMillan or as a Matthew Golden? No. I have him much further down my board than those two guys. So I think it'd be more so a trade-back scenario for me if they're able to find a dance partner. I think if they land Emeka Egbuka and pick up a top 100 pick, and they're doing so selecting him in the 20s, I think I'd be super happy, because then you're finding the Robin to CeeDee Lamb's Batman, and you can take it there and build your offense around it. That's a true wide receiver, too, who expects to be and knows how to be a wide receiver, too. So if you're looking for compliments, I think his name's on the list, but I think it depends on trying to move around a little bit in order to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's those character guys. It just makes it easier for the coaches, especially in a first year for a guy like Schottenheimer. Now, speaking of first year back for Eberflus, we know he loves linebackers and the work he does with those guys, and we know we're kind of missing Overshown. Are you comfortable with everything they have at linebacker right now, or would you say I still need, if there's a body, I'd love to get one?
Yeah, I think there's a couple names in this draft that not only they feel confident that they would want, but I think would fit the value of where they need to take those guys, because they're not going to take a guy like Jahad Campbell, Alabama, in the first round. Jalen Walker's a name that's catching some steam, or picking up some steam as we get closer. He's probably not going to be there at 12 as a linebacker, edge rusher type of hybrid. I think if you're going to see a linebacker, it'll come in the second round with a guy like Carson Schlesinger. He's a UCLA linebacker who I actually compared to DeMarvion Overshown. I see a lot of Demo in his college tape and what he did lengthwise, speed-wise, plays downhill with a vengeance, is good in coverage. They sent multiple guys to his pro day private workout out on the West Coast, and I think Schlesinger's a name to keep in mind going into day two. But I do like what they've added. I like the addition of Kenneth Murray. I think that's an underrated trade that they've made this offseason to add a quality starter who had 100-plus tackles last year. He's kind of the Eric Kendricks replacement in my mind. I think that's what Kenneth Murray does. Not the same type of player skill set-wise. I think they do things differently, and their film is certainly different. But I think from a production standpoint, I think Kenneth Murray can fill what Eric Kendricks did for this defense last year, and he's been around this system previously, and he knows some of the guys on this staff. Now, where you can still add is because you don't know DeMarvion Overshown's status for 2025.
Right.
We have the good news. Not really. I mean, initially we thought there was no status, right?
Yeah.
That he's not going to be available until late playoff time. He talked to our staff a couple of weeks ago and kind of said, I want to win Comeback Player of the Year in 2025. Not 26. He wanted to win Comeback Player of the Year in 25. So I think he feels really confident that he can get back out on the field early, but that's a player with optimism, and he's always been an optimistic individual. So you got to take that with a grain of salt. I don't think you can count on him, just like we were talking about with Trayvon Diggs from an injury standpoint. Plan around not having DeMarvion Overshown in 25. If you get him back, that's great. So because of that, I wouldn't be surprised if they do spend a pick on those linebackers, but it's got to be the right player at the right time, and you're going to sacrifice taking another position of need in order to do so, because like those 4 positions I mentioned earlier, you're only going to be able to address 3 of those in those first 3 picks.
Thank you very much for all of the great
awesome,
insight, and then a preemptive thank you for all the great work on the draft show.
Yeah, appreciate it. Can't wait to be on with the guys starting at 6 o'clock tomorrow. It's going to be a long weekend, and can't wait to be on with you guys all the way through.